Well, hello, everyone. We're so glad that you joined us for the Level Up Your Legacy live stream podcast. Whether you're watching us live or maybe you're going to join in sometime in the future, we are so thankful that you tuned in. Hey, my name is Paul McCosco, and I'm a coach at Bill Cox Coaching. And I'm joined here today by Bill Cox. And in a minute, we're going to get into a discussion about Ryan Holiday's book, Ego is the Enemy. But first, let me bring you up to speed just a little bit. This is our fourth installment in the series where we're talking about the book Ego is the Enemy. And we're walking through it chapter by chapter and just sharing a little bit about what we're learning. We're talking about the importance of keeping your ego in check, both personally and professionally. So for today's video, we wanted to do something exciting and we wanted to go live. We wanted to discuss today's material and take questions that maybe you have in real time. So we're going to make a recording of today's video available to viewers later on. So make sure that if you haven't yet signed up for our weekly emails, you go to billcoxcoaching.com and sign up. It's free. We send 1 or 2 emails a week and we'll keep you connected with all the things that we're doing. So today's chapter that we're talking about is Ego is the Enemy, chapter 3. It's all about becoming a student. Now, maybe the thought of becoming a student conjures up some memories of going back to high school or college, and maybe that doesn't sound very fun at all, or maybe it does. Either way, this is where we're going to camp today. Ryan Holiday, to kick off this chapter, he starts with a great story about the lead guitarist of Metallica. His name is Kirk Hammet. Now, imagine this. Just into your 20s, Kirk was, right? He was offered his dream job of being the band's lead guitar player when the band abruptly threw out their previous guitar player. So Metallica at this point was barely known, but they had big dreams. And although Kirk, he was a great player when he was offered the job, he knew that he wanted to be better and that the band's ultimate success would require him to be better. So he sought out a teacher who would challenge him in ways that he had never been challenged before, so he could, as the book puts it, learn what he didn't know. And he picked Joe Satriani. Now, maybe that name sounds familiar to you as well. So for 2 years, Joe drilled into him technique, musical theory. He gave him objective feedback. He judged his performance, and he was required to meet these weekly standards that Joe would set. And what do you know? The rest is history. The band would go on later to become one of the most successful bands in the past 40 years. Now, would they have been that successful without Kirk's self-awareness to know that he needed to get better and that he needed to become a student? Only history would know. But Bill, this is where I want to camp now for our first topic. Given Kirk Hammet's story, let's discuss a little bit the relationship between humility and ego. How are those two related, do you think? Ooh, we can't hear you, buddy. Can you hear me?
I'm having all kinds of Wi-Fi issues this morning. Really sorry. I'm going to have to actually jump out and rejoin. I'll be right back.
Sure. So to bring you up to speed, we're talking about Ego is the Enemy, chapter 3. And we just talked about Kirk Hammet's story of the band Metallica. They had decided that they were going to have a recording session in New York City. And right before the recording session, what they did is they threw out their lead guitar player, David Mustaine, and they offered Kirk Hammett the job to be the lead guitar player of Metallica. Now, at this time, Metallica was such an unknown band, but Kirk jumped on the opportunity to become the band's new lead guitar player. And part of his story is that when he stepped into that role as the lead guitar player of Metallica, he knew that he had to become better. He knew that he couldn't rely on what got him there to keep him there. And so what he did was he took lessons from Joe Satriani. And so we're talking about the concept of humility and ego and understanding that you need to be a student no matter what season of life you're in. So Now I think Bill's back. We're going to talk about the relationship between humility and ego.
I'm so sorry. How's this for an awesome kickoff to the first podcast? Hey, this is all my fault, none of Paul's. So you're getting to see just the reality of life kicking in here. And this is a good one, Paul. This really kind of helps us with our own egos, right?
Amen. Keeps us humble.
Well, I was thinking about, it was a great story. I was saying last week what a great storyteller Ryan is. And I love this story about Kirk Hammet. And it really kind of took me back to, if you've been going through the book, really what Ryan talks about in the opening chapter I went back to the initial definition of ego, and he defines it as an unhealthy belief in our own importance, the arrogance, right? And I think for all of us, we've been going throughout this book, is that the reality of that is it's true for all of us. We all are challenged with that part of us that's unhealthy, that wants to think and believe things about ourselves that just aren't true. And sometimes, as in the case with Kirk, you have situations in life that almost even set you up to think those things about yourself. And, you see this all the time in sports and in entertainment. Like, people read too many of their own headlines and they start to believe them. And that's kind of what I thought of when I read the story about Kirk. I was just so impressed, that here's a guy at the top of the music industry as a player himself, and yet he realizes that he's got so much to learn, which, as you go throughout the chapter, you realize that was the very thing that enabled him to be truly successful.
I think about like the thousands of students that Joe Satriani must have had too, right? Because he's pretty well renowned in his own right. But how much more motivated he probably was as a teacher of Kirk's to see that hunger and that fire, and to not, I guess, feel like he had already arrived when he had come.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you're a teacher. What excites you about the kind of clients that you get,
Well, yeah, I was thinking about this. I've been reading this whole book through the lens of my own life, just like how much I battle with this. One of the quotes from the chapter I thought was really great. He said, "The power of being a student is not just that it's an extended period of instruction. It also places the ego and ambition in someone else's hand." I just thought that was so good, because I think becoming a student and staying a student, kind of like, Kirk's example here, keeps us grounded. It kind of infuses our lives with a continual stream of healthy humility. Mm-hmm. I don't know about you, but like when I put myself in environments where like I'm not the go-to professional, and I am the learner, I feel really vulnerable. I like, impotent is kind of a word that kind of came to mind as I was thinking about this. And you can literally feel my ego just being stripped away in those moments. It's like I'm almost exposed. And it's really a healthy thing.
Yeah, not always desirable, but definitely.
No, gosh, no. It feels awful in one sense, but you just know in your heart of hearts, this is right. This is healthy for me. This is good. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of like exercise, right? Beforehand, you're like, I don't want to do that. After you're like, I so needed that. That's exactly what I needed to do. It reminded me of, I like to play guitar. So I was really excited when I started.
I was thinking about you in this chapter.
I was blown away. So I used to take guitar lessons from a guy named Josh Karikoff. And, what impressed me initially was this kid. And I say kid because before he was 20 years old, he was written up in Guitar Player magazine as one of the top 20 unsigned guitar players. Right. Wow. And so like what initially attracted him to me was like, this guy's a phenomenal player. But what kept me in the lessons was the fact that every time we would get there, before I would even arrive, he would be practicing his scales. He would be going over technique. And like every lesson he would talk about how, I've not arrived. There's always another scale. There's always another technique. And I'm like, dude, here's this guy who's like to a level I would dream of being, but who constantly sees himself as someone who can learn more.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, that humility is attractive, and that humility has continued to help him get better, which
I think that's so good. I mean, I think there's a lot to be said for the teacher in this whole process too, right? Like some teachers, and even in the case of the story that we read with Kirk Hammet and Joe Satriani, I mean, sound like he was kind of he wasn't playing around, you're going to do what he said or you're going to be out. And I'm not criticizing that. I do know that the teachers I've had that have been like the most helpful for me themselves have this sense of humility about them, that they're constantly learning, and it kind of takes the pressure off, I think, when you're in that place of feeling vulnerable and it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. I have so much to learn. And then yet the person you look up to, they're just like, hey, this is a process. I'm learning too. And when you have that kind of a spirit in the teacher, I think it kind of takes the pressure off, and it helps me learn a lot more freely, I think, instead of feeling like pressure.
That's interesting, because it's almost like that creates an environment that's conducive for learning.
Yeah, exactly. That's so well said.
I love it. Well, continuing this thought of teachers, the next story that Ryan Holiday talks about in this chapter is another teacher, but he's not a music teacher. He's an MMA teacher, kind of like the other end of the spectrum, right? Yeah. You may even recognize his name, Frank Shamrock. He was a skilled trainer, and he had a unique system to train his mixed martial arts fighters, and he called it plus, minus, and equal. And initially that just like had my wheels turning. I want to read a quote from page 39. And Ryan said, each fighter to become great, he said, needs to have someone better that they can learn from, someone lesser who they can teach, and someone equal that they can challenge themselves against. Now there is so much wisdom in that nugget, not just for fighting, but for everyday life. So let's talk about that for just a second. Personal experiences with having a plus, a minus, and an equal, and how has that shaped you either personally or professionally, Bill?
Well, I mean, I thought a lot about the pluses on this one, because I can think of a lot of examples of people in my life that I want to and need to learn from. One of the quotes that I really loved that Shamrock said, for me, I always stay a student. You put yourself beneath someone you trust. And I think that's such a good, again, kind of coming back to what we just talked about. The best teachers are someone that we trust. We have confidence in their knowledge. We have confidence in who they are as people. There's something about them that we really want to learn and kind of place ourselves under their tutelage. And man, I mean, I got so many examples from learning how to shoot a gun from my brother, Tim. He was, for 3 decades, he provided tactical firearms instruction for the state in which he was a parole officer in. So just a true professional. I remember the first time learning how to shoot a gun, I didn't know anything, I mean, I remember the first time I shot a gun, I did so without instruction, and I had my hand up over the slide, and I was holding the gun wrong. And that slide came back after I fired a round, and it stripped the skin off the top of my right hand.
So you literally put your life in someone's hand that you could trust.
Yeah, well, it's simply because I didn't know what I was doing, and I was too proud to ask. And I'm holding the gun like this, and that slide came back off that 9mm and just took the skin right off the top of my hand. And, it's just like, there's an example of ego and how it gets in the way. But finally, like going to one of his classes and just being a student from the ground up. Like, here's how you hold a gun. Here's how you holster a gun. Here's how you draw your 9mm from your holster. Here's how you point. I mean, just the whole process. Here's how you load a magazine and all those things, like basic things that I just never knew, learning from a true pro that when I placed myself under his teaching, you know, after 6 hours, I was amazed at what I had learned just in a short period of time. But I also could relate to the mixed martial arts thing too, because years ago I took Western style boxing, and it kind of reminds me of Mike Tyson's statement, you know, everybody has a plan until they're punched in the face. And, like I had all three of those levels involved when I was taking Western style boxing. I had, you know, of course, those over me that were teaching me. And I had those colleagues who were going through the class as well. And then a little bit as I continued to develop my skills, some newer people who were coming to the program that I could help and train too. It was a really cool process. But like in that one, the equal was the one where I really learned a lot, because I remember one morning we were training in the basement of the YMCA and a semi-pro boxer came in, and I was feeling pretty good about my skill level. And he was like one of the people taking the class too. So he was like, in a sense, on my par. And we got paired up together to spar. Oh my gosh, dude. I mean, like I started getting hit and I couldn't even see where the punches were coming from. I mean, that was totally it just rocked my world inside of a minute. And like it was one of those examples where like, okay, you just learned that there's a lot about this sport that you don't even have a clue about. And so humbling, but really good, you know, like really, really healthy for me to kind of be exposed and realize once again, man, there's so much I have to learn about this. But I mean, there's so many levels on my life where I feel like I'm learning, whether it's our digital marketer that we work with, Bob Lewin. I thought I knew something about marketing until I met Bob, you know, and I realized how much I don't know. I do some investing in cryptocurrencies, and I feel like that's a whole world that I'm just now learning. So like Dan Hollings has been a mentor there. I just see, for me, it's the plus side of this. I see at every level of my life.
That's awesome. You know, when you were talking, I think you used the word humble and you used healthy. And there's another H word that I think we kind of shy away from. It's help, right? Because isn't saying I need to learn something asking for help? And that's not always easy to do, you know, especially speaking as a male. You know, I don't like to admit that I need help, but there are certain things that I need help with and I need to get better. And I'll tell you what, asking for help is one of the greatest ways that you can be humble, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And isn't it funny? Like, you automatically know when somebody's faking it or posing or trying to pretend like they know. I mean, I've done this. I'm calling myself out here, where I try to act like I know what I'm talking about or like I belong. And when I really think about that, it's so easy to see someone who is trying to give this impression like they know when they really don't. And it's not a good look.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow.
Like, okay, there's some insecurity in this person and it's going to hold them back in life. I know that because I've been that person.
That's well said.
Because that really kind of keeps you from learning, right? Like trying to think of the chapter in here, or not the chapter, the quote in there that really kind of, it gave the idea like if you think you have the answers, then by definition it's impossible for you to learn, because your mindset is there's really nothing more for me to learn here, and so you're going to be closed off from learning.
Wow, you know what? And that's a perfect segue into that. I want to share that quote. But before we do that, I want to encourage anyone who's watching, if you have any questions, type them in the comments. If we've got time at the end, we'd love to address those questions before we share our final thought. But here, let's go right to that quote. It was from Epictetus. I think that's how you say it.
Epictetus.
Epictetus. I needed help, Bill. Thank you. Thank you.
I want you to get that one right.
He said, you cannot learn if you think you already know. I'm going to say it again because it's just such a gold mine. You cannot learn if you think you already know. Yeah, so think about that practically. What are some ways that you can practically keep a student's mindset?
Well, I thought of a couple things. One was just read. We work a lot with leaders in our organization, and there's a reason why we do that, because we know that leaders touch many lives, and we recognize that if we can affect one leader's life, we can indirectly have an impact on many people's lives. But this is a John Maxwellism that leaders are readers, right? Mm-hmm. I am a voracious reader, and I think a better word for that is learner. Reading to me, with what we have at our disposal at this time in history, through platforms like Amazon and digital learning, whether it's Audible books or your Kindle, or your ability to order a book and have it in 2 days, or it might be podcasts that you listen to. I think, that one way is just continually read and learn. For me, reading helps me continually realize how much I don't know. Like the older I get, the more I feel like I don't know. The more I realize how much I don't know. And this is such a great opportunity to constantly, whatever area of life that you want to grow in or develop, or, professional skill area that you want to hone, expose yourself to people in your field who are way further down the path than you. When that could be through books, that could be through YouTube, that could be any number of ways. Like one of the skills that I have worked on over the years is communication and public speaking. And when I first started speaking, I really was pretty bad, but I had some talent. It's kind of like the whole Strengths Finders concept from Gallup, where you can't be anything you want to be, but you can be a whole lot more of who you already are.
I love that.
I had some innate talent there, but it needed developed. It needed honed. I needed to practice. I needed to learn some principles of effective communication. So that's just been a discipline that I have been in for years. And I mean, for decades, I've been watching really gifted communicators and constantly learning more about my craft as I communicate. And it's both inspiring, because you realize the impact of a great communicator that they can have on a person's life. I think about all the ways that I've been inspired and challenged, what I've learned through great communicators. And so it's really inspiring. On one hand, it's grounding, because you're like, wow, I thought I was a good communicator. And then I just listened to this person and I realized, like, I have a long way to go. I have a lot of work to do. So I think reading is critical. If you don't like to read, learn how to like it. Learn to like it. It's kind of like, I don't like broccoli, but I learned how to like it. My favorite analogy is, you know what? I don't like vacuuming, but I love vacuuming. I don't like vacuuming because it's just not that fun, but I love vacuuming because of the value of it, because I get to serve and help my wife and be a good partner in the maintaining of our home. And so in that sense, I love vacuuming. You may not like to read, but value the fruits of reading and learn to love it and value it and appreciate it and do it. And then find somebody that you can learn from, who's in your lane, who's further down the path than you. And those two things, I think, are great ways to stay the student.
I love it. And if you think about reading, it's probably the easiest way to find a plus, right? Because anybody you're going to read is a little bit further down the road than you are. And that's a fantastic, going back to Shamrock's analogy. I love what Bill Hybels said too. He said, armed with enough humility, leaders can learn from anyone too. So just having that mindset that what can I learn today? Who can I learn from today? Who, if you're a person of faith, who is God going to put in your path that potentially, is a divine appointment that you can learn from? I was reading a book recently, and it talked about giving yourself the gift of failure. And I love it. It's a songwriting book, right? And this is the quote from it. It says, being willing to sound bad is one of the most important pieces of advice I can give you. Writing a song will teach you that it's okay to fail. And more than that, it's actually good to fail. Failure is a good kind of pain that you shouldn't let go to waste. And the thought behind that is, if you want to be good at something, be willing to be bad at it first. Just start down the road. And I found that so freeing, because we want to be where those mentors are, where those pluses are in our life. But we've got to go through the process of getting there, and being okay in that process of when you're not there yet is a real gift to yourself. So
I think that's such an important principle, that we need to embrace the journey of learning and growing. Embracing the process is really where the magic is at. I think the most accomplished people in life never feel like they've arrived. They're always the learner. They're always the student. There's always that level of humility there. And just kind of one final thought on this as it relates to coaching. And leadership, to me, one of the qualities that I always look for in successful people in life, and leaders who are going to be effective, or coaching clients who are going to be great clients and see real change in their life, is self-awareness. I'm creating the kind of life and putting myself in environments that continually help me expand the territory of self-awareness. And to me, like, putting yourself in the position of a student and learning from somebody is one of the most powerful tools or agents for expanding self-awareness that I know of. And it was just like, when I got punched in the face, it was like, wow, okay, I am wide awake right now.
All right.
Now I know what I don't know, and I know that I need to know more in order to become more effective in this area.
I love that. I think you could say that self-awareness is probably the cornerstone principle of always remaining a student.
Yeah.
So, well, with that, as we close today, I want to thank you so much for tuning in to podcast number 1. We hope you've enjoyed today's discussion. Maybe take a moment and tag someone in this post, or share this video with someone who may find the discussion helpful. And until next time, this is Paul McCosco and Bill Cox saying so long for now on the Level Up Your Legacy live stream and podcast.
Hey, thanks again for watching today's video. And before you go to the bottom of the screen, like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and make sure you go to billcoxcoaching.com. Sign up for our regular newsletter to help you move from success to significance and lead your life in such a way that you live a legacy. Have a great day.